comrades and friends, the war launched by Putin government in Russia on the people of Ukraine is a act which should be condemned by all democratic forces in the world. Launching such a barbarous attack, raining miseries on the people cannot be justified at any cost. These things should be discussed and decided through negotiations. It is a very cruel attack launched by the imperialist regime of Putin in order to consolidate his home support of the ruling classes and to push forward his ambitions, imperialist ambitions. So CPI star severely condemns this attack and demand that it should be stopped and appeal to the progressive forces all over the world to come forward to demand an end to this criminal attack. We call upon all the party committees to join with the progressive forces and organize anti-war demonstrations wherever possible. At the same time, we are of the view that this cannot be seen in isolation. Putin's attack on Ukraine cannot be seen in isolation. It is linked to many aspects. For example, it is a reflection of the intensifying inter-imperialist contradictions in the world. As we are all aware, NATO was started after Second World War as a shield for the imperialist forces to launch attacks on the socialist forces which were advancing forward. In order to crush the socialist forces, in order to crush the national liberation movements, the imperialists in Europe, Western Europe, joined with the US imperialism under its latest initiative to mobilize the NATO forces. And NATO has a record of criminal attacks, criminal actions. The Cold War was launched and NATO became an instrument of Cold War for the imperialist forces. When Soviet Union turned from a socialist force to a social imperialist power, superpower, contending and colluding with the US imperialism for world hegemony, the Cold War intensified further, and NATO again continued to play its role. But in 1991, when the Soviet Union collapsed, disintegrated, and before that the East European socialist countries also had abandoned the socialist path and also degenerated, the world hoped for the end of NATO also. When the end of civilization was declared by imperialist forces, and they started changing their tactics for world hegemony, everybody expected that NATO will be dissolved, because NATO was used as a shield for their Cold War. So once the Cold War is over, NATO will be dissolved. But what happened? On the contrary, NATO was nuclearized. Nuclear weapons were introduced into NATO's armory, and in the new situation, under the neoliberal policies, when people all over the world were attacked in new forms, more barbarous forms, wherever the people came forward, or wherever the imperialists led by US imperialism had to protect its petroleum interests or other interests, NATO was used. NATO was used in support of US imperialism in the Vietnam War. The NATO forces were used in Middle East, in North Africa and other places. And NATO was used in the Afghanistan war also. So US imperialism was arming NATO with new weapons and utilizing NATO for more aggressive acts against the world people. As a part of it, it started absorbing the former socialist countries of Eastern Europe into its fold. Then it started absorbing the states which came out of Soviet Union. The federated Soviet Union, from the federated Soviet Union, many states came out, and that though there was an attempt by Russia to bring them together around them, it did not succeed, and the different nations went away. And the NATO was in a planning and executing plans to absorb these states also. In this way, NATO, led by US imperialism, was launching a plan to surround Russia by reaching up to the borders of Russia, absorbing all these countries into its fold. Naturally, in the Inter-Imprtialist contradiction with the NATO force, NATO led by US forces, Putin saw it as a threat to his imperialist interests, Russia's imperialist interests. So this Inter-Imprtialist contradiction sharpened. And once Ukraine also came under pressure, and Ukraine's new neo-fascist government was preparing for merging NATO also, merging Ukraine also into NATO, the warnings came from Soviet Union, so it's Russia. And Russia wanted to block this move, and they opposed this move by demanding that the NATO should declare that they will not absorb Ukraine also. It is in this situation when the Inter-Imperialist contradiction reached a flashpoint. Instead of giving a assurance to Russia that Ukraine will not be taken into NATO, more aggressive speeches came from Biden, who replaced Trump, but who was talking in Trump's language, or in Trump's ideas were put forward by Biden in new forms, and he became more aggressive, and he was declaring that there will be no going back from the policies of NATO. It is in this situation when Russia felt threatened that the NATO forces will be reaching its borders, and it will be a danger to this in the economic and other interests. They started planning for the military action. In the in between, US had another idea also. US imperialism felt that the Russian-German treaty for petroleum transfer from Russia to Germany through a pipeline which was completed, and almost 50% of the petroleum demands of Germany was received from Russia. America felt threatened with its economic interests are also threatened, facing a danger. So in this situation, US was not ready to relent, and Russia felt that it had no other option but to attack Ukraine. So this situation, this background should be seen. And in this background, this attack has taken place. But whatever may be these attacks, there's no justification for a brutal attack like what is happening in Ukraine. So we call for an end to this attack, and imperialism means war, and people of the world have to fight against all the imperialist powers and their inter-imperialist contradictions, and to put an end to this Ukrainian war. So we stand solidly behind the Ukrainian people. We declare solidarity with the Ukrainian people, and we call upon all the progressive forces to come in support of the Ukrainian people and to demand that imperialists stop this warmongering and wars, which are reigning miseries of the people. And CPM registrar declares its intention to spread the anti-war demonstrations and protests all over the country as early as possible. Let us come forward to fight against the imperialist aggression on Russian aggression on Ukraine, and against all the imperialist forces who are warmongering. They are going ahead with their warmongering policies. Let us go forward, comrades, with the anti-imperialist movement. Salute.